With us this morning also Senator Pat Toomey from the state of Pennsylvania. And good morning, Senator. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. I'm doing fine. How are you?
Well, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. And, we go from COVID-19 now to protests around the country over George Floyd being killed in Minneapolis. Many of us have seen the video and I think recoiled in horror as all of that happened. And, the question, I guess, across the country right now, Senator, is the protests across America. Are we still a nation of liberty and justice, or not liberty and justice for all? I was always struck by and liberty and justice for all at the end of our Pledge of Allegiance. And there are some people, I think, saying today, no. When it comes to policing, when it comes to justice in this country, there are some deep-seated problems. There's a tendency, I think, to be critical out of the gate, depending on what side you're on. And instead of being critical, maybe we need to analyze what is going on in our country right now, far beyond the tragic death of George Floyd. Your thoughts about that whole situation?
Well, yeah, that's a big topic, Gary, and obviously it's on a lot of people's minds, and understandably so. Look, I don't know how any person can watch the video of the killing of George Floyd and not be sickened by it, right? I mean, it was just a sickening thing to watch.
Absolutely.
There has to be justice for that. And fortunately, the police officer who was involved was very quickly arrested. He's been charged with the killing. He's going to be tried. And it'd be absolutely shocking to me if he's not convicted. I suspect he will be convicted. And frankly, there's some of the officers who were there and appear to me to be accomplices. They probably need to be tried too. So we need to be a country of justice. No one's above the law. That cop, probably several cops, their behavior was outrageous, and they need to be punished. There is no reason, however, the data does not support the narrative that this is simply a reflection of systemically racist police, that police forces as institutions are inherently racist organizations that systematically discriminate and attack and even routinely kill black Americans. The data doesn't support that. It's just not true. It's also the case that many, and probably most big city police forces have very large numbers of African American and Hispanic American and non-white members of the police force. What do we think? They're racist against their own people? That's absurd. So I think what we need to do is remember the vast majority of law enforcement folks are good, decent, honorable men and women who take enormous personal risks to keep us all safe. And we need them, and every community needs them. And the communities that need them the most are the communities that have the most crime, which tend to be in the inner cities. So we need to provide the support for our police officers, the political support, the support, the moral support. And by all means, when we find the bad apples, and there are bad apples in every walk of life, and that will include police, when we find them, they need to be held accountable.
We look at our institutions today in this country. There's a lot of distrust in institutions. I know you're well aware of that, being in the Congress, and we see distrust in all kinds of institutions, from religion to politics to law enforcement to our Justice Department, our CIA, our FBI, the whole thing. We are distrustful of many of the things that we've set up to represent us as citizens in this country. How do we get that back? How do we, maybe it's more perception than reality. I'm not sure, but the perception certainly is out there. And you know how perception many times can serve as our reality in lieu of it. Your thoughts about that, Senator?
Yeah, Gary, look, you're right. First of all, I don't think it's even an arguable matter that there has been an erosion of trust in institutions, and an awful lot of it is justified. Look, I don't think there's a single easy solution. I think, in my level, one of the things we can think about as the federal government is maybe a little more humility, a little more modesty, rather than trying to go out and solve all problems and take over the economy and redistribute wealth and achieve nirvana as the outcome. Maybe we ought to recognize that maybe our main responsibility ought to be the safety and security of the American people and defending the freedom of the American people. That was, after all, the initial purpose for which the federal government was set up 240 years ago, it's still a pretty good objective.
When you look at how we've handled the COVID-19 virus from the standpoint of the federal government's role in it, have we done a good job? Have we not done a good job? Have we gotten to the point where money doesn't seem to mean a whole lot anymore as we kind of pour it out here to try to make up for the number of jobs that we've kind of taken out of business? Small business in America, as you well know here in Pennsylvania, is going to take a huge hit on this. Many people are now sitting back saying, hey, we've trashed the economy needlessly. I'm putting that all on a great big swirl for you, so I'll let you decide how you want to answer that.
Yeah, there's an awful lot we're going to learn as we analyze this. I mean, right now what I want to do is make sure we're creating the environment where we can have a recovery, where people can get back to work, where we can go back to earning our livelihoods, where people who've invested their life savings in a little shop on Main Street don't lose everything, and they're able to make a comeback. So that's my big focus. But you raise a lot of important questions, and I've got a lot of questions. How is it that we didn't have a much more effective plan on the shelf at the CDC for how to deal with a flu-like pandemic? It's not as though this has never happened before. They've actually happened several times in the last couple of decades, never on this scale, but we didn't know that the SARS virus wasn't going to be on this scale, and it hit us just a few years ago. So why were we not more prepared is a good, valid, I think, important question. The other is we're going to have to do a lot of soul-searching about this idea of shutting down the economy and locking down healthy people in place.
Right.
The idea of quarantining people who are sick and who can infect others is as old as the hills, and it makes a lot of sense. If you have an infectious disease, we don't want you to spread it to others, and so we put people in a quarantine when we have to. We have never before decided to quarantine America, and we did enormous damage, and then it turns out that we learned this is a disease that is extremely focused on a vulnerable subset of Americans, not everybody. But look, in Pennsylvania, 69% of all fatalities have happened inside the walls of a nursing home.
Correct.
And that tells you that this is the most vulnerable subset of the most vulnerable age group that we have in our society. Clearly, we needed to do a better job protecting those vulnerable people. But it probably was not a good idea to have this universal shutdown. You know, we've got interesting counter examples. The country of Sweden, for instance, which had virtually no lockdown whatsoever, simply encouraged people to engage in a little social distancing, wear a mask, be careful. They didn't close down their restaurants. And they have far lower rates of virus and fatalities than some American states that did the most draconian shutdowns. So we're going to learn a lot from this. I think a lot of mistakes were made. I think we're still way too slow in reopening Pennsylvania. And we're going to pay a price in lost livelihoods, in lost business, and people who lose their jobs and don't get it back. I think our response, part of our federal response has been effective. We've gone a long way in replacing lost income for people by a dramatic increase in unemployment benefits, expanding the universe of people eligible for unemployment benefits, direct payments to people. So hopefully we've made most people whole. Certainly at the low and medium end of the income earning spectrum, but it's not perfect by any means. And the efforts to keep businesses alive, that's very mixed. It's worked well for some businesses, it's not worked for others, which is part of the reason why the best solution is let's reopen. Let's make sure that people are following the safety protocols, but there is no danger of overrunning a single hospital in Pennsylvania with COVID patients. We have plenty of capacity. We've got the ability to treat people. There will continue to be some infections. This virus is not going to go extinct tomorrow, but we can manage this, and it's time we learn to live with it.
Senator, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Take care. Thank you. Senator Pat Toomey here on WSBA. Pat Toomey here on WSBA.